we're back.
And we're back. Does that hat feel like funky to you? Like it's like crinkled weird?
No.
The last time I wore it, like it almost seems like it was in a bag for too long, and now it's like formed that brim super janky.
Oh, you
Sorry,
think
not the brim, this part.
Yeah, one of my...
Like there's like dents in there.
I think it's because we put it in the washer.
Oh,
Because my Patriots hat did that too.
Oh, okay.
Where it's like dented in.
Okay. Yeah.
It doesn't like stand up like a trucker hat almost.
Yeah, but that one is supposed to, I think.
Yeah.
And it doesn't anymore.
No.
Okay. Did we talk about this in the podcast already? Where we talked about, about play with kids? I just did a post about like the importance of play and like 4 different types of play. Or did we talk about that
I don't think so.
air? One of the things that I found really interesting was, well, I mean, one, I think we see that as not important. I think generally, like with kids, I think we see it with toddlers and babies. Like, yeah, they're playing just to like pass the time, but not, to me, it's like the music thing again. It's like, it's in their nature to want to play, and it's not just for the fun of it. I mean, it is fun, but that is how they're helping themselves develop. Like that they are so self-sufficient in so many ways, kids are, that they know like intrinsically what they need. But the different types of play even, and why those are all really important, and why a lot of those are being, I would say, pushed out or not promoted as much. Like one of them being rough play, and like the importance of, especially when they're like kindergarten age and a little bit older, why it's important to have them be like pushing and like wrestling with each other, or picking each other up, or even like tumbling, like stuff that's rough that'll maybe give them bruises, or they have to like fight another person. The benefit of that, because it shows, there's research that shows that a lot of those kids have better body awareness. They know how to like obviously just move their body around in space, but then their awareness of how their body affects others. So like my actions, my physical actions, how I'm sitting next to someone even, or how I'm sitting in class, is that affecting the people around me? And then the obvious of understanding boundaries, that especially for boys, when they are not allowed to be as rough as they want to be, and like falling all over each other and pushing each other, that if they don't have that, that tends to lead into the territory that I think society as adults we're in right now, where they don't know what's appropriate or not appropriate, because they didn't have that as kids, maybe to the level that they could have. Then they don't know, like, oh, this person I'm reading, like, they don't like this. Like the ability to just see based off of facial expressions or comments, they're not able to read like, oh, that was too far.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what's tricky with being like teaching kids or parenting kids, is when to step in and when to back off. Because like you said, there's so much that kids are just naturally, like you said, like intuitively figuring things out, that you don't want to step on their toes with that and get involved when they are in that learning process of whatever it is. But then it's also, where's the boundary, and they need to learn to not do that all the time, or to that aggression, or whatever it may be, whether it's the pushing around or it's, really anything. Because I think it becomes a distraction, or it becomes annoying. Like we were on the plane and there was a kid sitting in front of us, and it was like, oh, you can just tell kids just like they're just constantly exploring. So like he was just like constantly just like tapping on the side of the airplane, and it's part of it is like, oh, you're a kid just like figuring things out, but then there's a point too where it's like, okay, but you need to learn that that's annoying to people, and you shouldn't be doing that, and that sort of thing. So there's just that hard balance of like when to step in and when to back off. But I think a lot of it, when it's the stuff like what you're talking about with playing and whatever, we get a little too hands-on, I think, to where it's like, oh, just let them figure it out and like explore with whatever they're doing, and they're going to, like you said, they're intuitive, and they're just going to start to figure things out and learn a little bit more, like you said, body awareness, or how they can interact with other kids and other people and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I don't know, it's hard. It's hard to teach kids, hard to parent kids all the time.
Yeah, but I thought that was interesting because I have a class of all boys, and they do, like, anytime they're going across the floor, like, they're pushing each other so that they can, like, they mess up, but they'll, like, push them to the ground. Or if they want to be first in line, they'll just push the other kid out of the way to be first in line. I'm gauging to see, like, okay, are they getting upset by that, or are they being too aggressive? But the recipient is always laughing and then kind of reciprocates in the same nature. And I'm like, okay, I just got to, like, let them do this.
Yeah.
Like, they're having way more fun that way too.
Yeah.
It's like they like to push each other around and jump on each other and whatever. It's like, okay, even if someone gets a little bit hurt, like, that's all how they're learning.
Yeah, that is. They're learning, like you said, how far can they push it, or what can they do and what can't they do. And you can't baby them all the time to where now they can't experience anything. It's like they need to know when is too far. And a lot of that is through experience. It's like, okay, I can't push them that hard. Or I notice when they get like this, like, I shouldn't be doing that stuff. Or when their face looks like this, like, I can, and we're doing it, and it's fine. And so, yeah, that a lot of times just like letting them figure it out.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to step in. Like, I know with some of my younger ones, like, someone will literally be crying, and then the other kid will, like, still be messing with them.
Oh,
I'm like, don't you see? Like, you're making her cry, or you're making the other person upset visibly. Like, you know what crying is. It's not like, oh, she's being quiet, and then maybe that's hard for them to read. Like, she's crying, and you're still, like, shoving something in her face or messing with her. Like, leave her alone.
Yeah.
But again, like, that's where as the adult, you step in and go, okay, see how she's responding? This means no. This means you got to cut it out.
Yeah. You know, another thing I noticed on this last convention, not enough people listen to this podcast. Too many dancers laying on the ground stretching before they do class.
Oh, yeah.
It just, this PSA needs to get out there and as quickly as possible.
I know.
And I was watching a video with Andy Galpin and Brian Johnson. Doesn't matter who they are, but Andy Galpin was having him go through like a warm-up and that sort of thing. And I was just like, okay, these are cool ideas to incorporate in my own warm-ups that I do with the kids and that sort of thing. And I just, again, maybe think of being at the convention again. It was just like, I just wanted to go over there and be like, guys, get up. Stop
doing that.
Stop laying on the ground. That's not going to warm you up. What are you doing?
That's what I said in the one before this. When I started class with the yoga warm-up, I explained to them, I was like, we're going to do a yoga warm-up because we're trying to get your bodies, like, I probably said something dorkier, but like warmed up. Probably said like cozy or something. But we're trying to get your bodies warmed up, but we're not going to stretch because at the beginning of class, you want to have your muscles be like really strong rubber bands, not like loosey-goosey rubber bands. And in my head, I'm like, I hope all the teachers are listening to this right now.
Yeah. Well, and it was cool watching the Andy Galpin one because he was going through like even more specific than I typically do, but just reiterating the point of your warm-up is for you to get your body ready for what you're about to do. So if you're just laying on the ground stretching, well, is the activity you're going to be doing just laying down stretching? It's like, no, you're probably going to be moving quickly and turning and lunging
changing
and
directions.
Squatting. Yeah. You're going to be doing all sorts of movement. So that's what your warm-up should be doing, is you moving across the floor or just opening your body up to different directions, but through movement and through, like you said, change of direction too. Like these kids are laying on the ground, just stretching out, and then they get up and they have to like basically like side lunge to go to the side in a lunge, and then they have to pop up, and then they have to spin, and then they have to like jump across the floor, and then do another leap, and then I'm like,
and you just did the splits.
Yeah, and all you
That's
did
what
was
you
just stretch out your hamstrings for a couple seconds. It's like you're doing all this movement and change of direction and explosion and all that kind of stuff, and none of your warm up is putting you
Priming
in
that?
Yeah, putting you in those positions to do that next, basically. It's like that's what the warm up is. It's getting you ready to do what you're about to do. So your warm up should almost look like what you're about to do. And it's just like every single classroom I go into, I'm like, oh no, don't be doing that. Because it's just not the most efficient and best way to get them ready to do what they're doing.
Well, not even
That's
most efficient. Like there's a point where it can become dangerous because now we're in the line of not even close to preventing injury.
Well,
like
exactly.
we might be causing injury with it.
The amount of kids that have a knee issue, or they are like, oh, my hamstring feels weird. Like maybe I pulled a hamstring, or my ankles are hurting and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's some of it that it is just like you landed wrong, or there was this one instance that made it happen. But I would bet a lot of it is because the warm-ups are just improper. Like you're just not warming up correctly, and then you go to do explosive movements and your body's not ready to do that. It's very odd how injured and hurt dancers are all the time, and I think a lot of it can be attributed to the warm-up,
especially at younger ages where they're not having the overuse issue quite yet. It's like you only take class a couple times a week, but you still have these problems. Yeah. As you get older, I think it's a combination of both. I think it's overuse of the same stuff and improper warm-ups to lead you into the next thing, which is also causing more irritation on the same things and in the wrong way. But when you're 8, it's like, but you still have the same injuries as that 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And all of you guys kind of had the same injuries. There's got to be a through line, especially when you're all maybe taking different classes and training different.
Yeah.
Like, but you're using the same muscles and your connective tissues using this. Like, I think of a ballet dancer when they start at age 2 or 3 compared to when they're 18. It's like, well, you've been doing plie since you were 2.
Yeah.
Like,
same.
That is excessive use over years and years through your development.
Yeah.
So, like, I think we were always taught stretch as much as you possibly can before, like, age 11 or 12, because that's when your body starts to develop and that ability to, which I don't even know if that's true. Like, your ability to become more flexible stops then. Like, that's what we were told. We're thinking about it now, I'm like,
I don't know.
Muscle is muscle. Like, if you stretch it, it's stretched. Like, you're gain that.
You're probably more pliable the younger you are.
And is that more like a cartilage thing and like a bone structure?
Yeah, probably.
Like your tissues are more malleable because your bones aren't structured yet?
I don't know specifically, but it's the same with like the brain too. It's like your brain's continuously developing, and you know, the same with like learning languages early on. You're more likely to stick with it, all that kind of stuff. Like I can see that there's some truth to that, especially when you go through and like you see kids that, like, we even kind of play that game sometimes where we'll see maybe a teenager, a kid that's a little bit older, and it's like, okay, what sport do you think they play?
Oh, yeah.
Because you can kind of tell by the way that they move and the way that they carry themselves and what they do. Like, you can always spot a wrestler. Yeah. It's super easy. They walk like a gorilla.
Yeah.
So I think it's just you're more pliable and more able to switch and, I don't know, whatever, develop in that direction. So I think there's probably some truth to it with the flexibility thing. But again, like, put it at the right part of the day of exercising kind of thing. Like, yeah, you should probably be stretching more than, say, football players, but it's not at the beginning of class when you're about to go do the stuff.
Right.
Like, it should be at the end of your day, not even in the class, because if you're going from that to another class or 3 more hours of class, there's no point to stretch after that. You have to get ready to do the next class again. So putting it all the way at the end of your entire day is the most advisable. And then you can stretch on other days or times where you don't have an activity coming up.
Correct.
But that's just not the...
And that does
advice.
put more responsibility on the kid to having to like, okay, well, maybe your last class isn't everyone's last class, or your last practice. Like maybe you're doing something else after that and whatever. So I don't think it's always on your teacher or coach to know when everyone's last thing is, because that's just hard to gauge. That should be you taking an extra 5 minutes after your practice and taking care of that. Like when we were growing up, that's what we were told. We were told, be there 5 to 10 minutes before class so that you can warm up and stretch on your own, because we're jumping right into class. Like that was never a part of the curriculum, was stretching. That was like you had to warm up on your own, because that also taught you be there 5 minutes early, be ready when the teacher is ready, and that you're like walking into class already engaged and ready to go. To where I don't think that's really a thing anymore. And kids are also so busy that they're coming from sport to sport to sport.
Yeah.
That their nights are much more packed probably. But yeah.
I thought the video that I watched with those two guys was interesting, because he was taking him through a warm up through specific moves, and then the exercises that they did afterwards pretty much directly correlated to what their warm up was. So it made me think to make like the warm-ups that I do with them maybe even more specific to what we will be doing, because I just kind of do like a general full body warm-up, get them through a whole bunch of different movements and moving and that sort of thing. But what he was doing was interesting, because it was like 4 different moves for the warm-up, and then they went to Turkish get-ups, and we're doing that for part of their exercise, or part of the strength building part of it or whatever. And it was like every section of the Turkish get up they had done a warm up for, basically. So he was like, look at how that's all connected to the warm up. And it's like, we've already put you through basically all these moves. It's just now the Turkish get up is like the full movement of it all.
Putting together with load.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting of how specific he made it to the warm up to the exercises that you're doing. So it's like, if you're going in and doing a leg day or something, and you're like warming up, I don't know, something random, like you're doing, I don't know, you just go walk on a treadmill, let's say, like the very, 2008 warm up. It's like, well, you're doing squats and lunges and leg curls, let's say. You just walking on a treadmill is not warming any of that up. You have zero knee bend going on related to what you should be doing. So it's like, you should be going into a squat and like doing some knee touches, or doing something like 90-90 where you're having your hip flexors rotating through and all that kind of stuff. And how much back load are you going to be doing with these squats and lunges? Are you doing barbell squats? So it's like, you maybe want to do some sort of back activation too, but not doing rows for you're not doing rows. You're basically just doing core stabilization with your squats. So it's like maybe doing some side planks or regular planks, or, something that involves just holding your core steady, but like in just getting that specific with it, rather than, I do the same 7 warm-up routines for, it doesn't matter what I'm doing.
Right.
And it's like, that is still way better than going and just walking on a treadmill to kind of get your body temperature up, but just getting even more specific so that you can be even more efficient when you do go to do those exercises. And you might even start to see like mobility and flexibility open up a little bit more too, because you're actually targeting those areas that you're going to be working on, and then you go work on them. You're doing full range of motion, and like everything's just like working on all cylinders because you did everything correctly, basically.
Yeah. Does that make sense for me, what I'm doing? Like for the ballet class that I teach on the weekends, I start with a yoga warm up, because one, I'm trying to set the tone without it being like a boring class, because I don't even think they come into that ballet class thinking like, oh, ballet is boring, because at home they're still probably doing like fun combo classes. Like it's probably not a thing, but my idea of doing the yoga was getting a full body kind of flow going to get their whole body moving, and with it being more load on the upper body, having to hold planks and having to go through downward dog and doing that would prime their muscles a little bit more for when we're doing all these arms where it needs to be full extension, that they would have somewhat already activated those muscles?
Yeah. I mean, I think if the moves that you are doing is related to what you'll be doing in ballet, totally. To where, like, if you're doing pliés, like adding that into the flow of the yoga, you know what I mean? Or in some sort of way, like with the plie being, you're kind of squatting down, knees are going down. You're going to have to be working on some ankle mobility with it.
Okay.
You know, hip work in a certain situation. It's like, so now trying to mimic that or put that somewhere in the yoga flow as well, where they're getting a little bit of ankle mobility work. They're getting like a knee over toe type situation. They're getting a hip flexor priming, working on that in whatever way. Yeah, I think as long as it's correlated to with what you're doing, then yeah, it's totally fine. And I think, like you said too, with it being a class setting and like wanting to have a certain environment for the class, like yoga would be perfect for a ballet class. But yeah, just making sure the warm up is actually hitting those moves that you'll be working on.
Okay.
It's like if you're going to be doing, I don't know, just like arm position type stuff at one part of the class, it's like you could be working on doing that with, like, you know, the warrior poses of coming up over the head and like moving the arms around and having that be very specific and intentional and not just lazy and they're just like not caring where their arms are at or that sort of thing. But yeah, as long as it's correlated to with what you're doing, I think that's the key. And that's the key with the warm up for anybody and anything. It's like you don't see football players, you know, starting their warm up and it's like they just do a bunch of bench press and squats and that sort of thing, and then they go out and play football. It's like that's way too static, stationary of movements. Like they're doing like high knee skips, butt kickers, you know, grapevine, karaoke type move. Like they're constantly like chopping the feet, moving, lateral movements quick, forward and back quick, doing all that sort of stuff. They're not doing a whole bunch of just static, let me stay still. And if they are, it's like, I don't know, maybe get a different strength and conditioning warm-up coach, because like you should be getting primed to do what you're about to do, which is extreme explosiveness, quick movements. Like that's what you should be
getting your
ready
CNS ready, basically.
Yeah, I mean, getting your CNS ready, getting your body ready to absorb all of that impact that you're about to put on it. And that's where, bringing it back to dancers too, it's the same sort of thing. Like you're doing so much quick bursts and change of direction and jumps and all that kind of stuff, and none of your warm-ups have that in it. It's like, no wonder they have knee pain. No wonder they have like ankle. Like one of the kids came in and was like, yeah, I think I like did something, like pulled the tendon or something in my ankle. And it was like, okay, so this is either probably way too much overuse to where like you're getting strained in that area, or you're probably not warming up with other things that you're doing, to where now it's like you went to go move quickly and there was too much load in that area, and now something like got aggravated, to where if you were doing warm-ups that were literally getting you warmed up and ready to do the movements you're about to do, if you're doing a bunch of, if the routine you're doing, the dance you're doing has a bunch of leaps or has a bunch of change of direction, your warm-ups should be mimicking that, and you should be getting ready to go do that, so that when you do go do that, your body's ready to absorb all that and you're good to go.
Would you say that 50, like your warm-up, 50% should be actually connecting to the muscles and the tendons and like not stretching, but getting that unstiff, I guess, and then 50% is activating the CNS for the appropriate action afterwards?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like 50%, but it's like, yeah, you should be, the whole idea of the warm-up is to get you ready to go, but injury prevention. Like that's where you're getting the injury prevention stuff, is through your warm-up. I mean, you're going to be doing it in your exercises by doing them correctly, but even with the warm-up, it's like if you're doing high knee skips or something, like make it more flowy, make it more, this is something that Andy Gelman was talking about in that video. It's like, this is your time to kind of like move in and out of these movements and be creative with it, or be like not so rigid with it, because you're going to be putting your body in awkward positions that you want to loosen up, and you want it to be warm and ready to go. Like your body temperature is going to come up regardless. You don't have to worry about that, but it's more about like making sure my ankles are getting full range of motion and my knees are getting full range of motion. My hips, if I'm going to be doing if I'm doing ballet, how much like hip flexor work is within that? Like so much of my warm up would be getting those hip flexors primed and ready to go. It's like, if I was doing a ballet class and I had the education around what the moves would be, it's like, even just visually watching it, there's so much hip flexor, there's so much calf stuff, that my warm-ups would be a whole bunch of hip flexor movements, like, you know, circling the hips and like the peeing dog and the donkey kickbacks, and then like standing and doing stuff like that, where it's just like high knee skips and high knee runs and butt kickers, and kind of like a yoga flow thing too, like going upward facing dog and like flexing and then coming out of it, and just
stretches
like,
where you still have to have control, because then you're having
control,
force still activated,
and focusing on, and with all these, like focusing on activating certain parts as you're doing the movements. Like if I'm doing a high knee skip, I'm not just lazily bringing my knees up, like I'm focusing on popping my knee up and having activation there. And then same with the calf stuff, like working in full ranges of motions for the calves, and then the ankle mobility. So like getting the knee over the toe, like a plie would be, and just like moving through those ranges of motion, and then going to the actual exercise or the ballet class. Now I'm telling the kids how the body actually works, of when you raise your leg up, you're using your hip flexor, not your glutes. So now they're completely activating their hip flexor to its maximum potential. Also bringing down injury, because if you're just lazily bringing your leg up, you're going to be putting so much strain on your hip flexor because you're not using enough muscle fibers to bring it up. So it's like, now you're actually activating and using the right muscles to do these exercises. And you're probably eliminating a huge percentage of all these chronic injuries that these kids have and these adults have, because they're doing a proper warm-up, and then they're actually activating the right muscle groups that they're supposed to be activating when they're doing exercises. Like when you tell somebody to do a squat, you don't tell them to like make sure you're flexing your biceps when you hold the bar. Like that's completely irrelevant. And now they have no focus on, like, you want to shut your legs off, don't think about your legs at all, just like go down and up and don't even think about it. It's like, that's how you get people to get injured.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be conscious of what you're doing, and you have to know what muscle groups are actually working when you're doing them, so that one, you can do it to the most efficiency. Like it's actually easier to do it that way than it is to, I'm just going to not think about it and just drop into a squat and come back up. And then also injury prevention. Like when you're going in control and you're activating the right muscle groups, they are doing their job to the maximum that they can. You're activating as many muscle fibers as you can, and you're doing it the proper way. Injury prevention goes down by a whole lot. Because
then you're also eliminating more of the potential side effect of, if you're just not thinking about it and you do it, the muscles that are stronger for you are going to be the one that picks up the pace or picks up the pieces. Then it's like, now your back is engaged when it doesn't need to. You're deadlifting fully with your back, or you're squatting fully with your back. You're extending your legs too quickly, that you're going to just go to your path of least resistance. Yeah. And that doesn't always mean the correct form. Majority of the time, it doesn't mean the correct form. That I think that's where it goes back to the CNS thing for me, especially with, I mean, even with working out. Like, if you are not sending that signal to produce the force, one, like you said, it's just not as efficient. But then so you take you the stretching in the beginning of class, or you're stretching in the beginning of your warm-up. If I'm about to go and dance, which is a lot of physical but it's like power driven, there's not a lot of, I can just slowly flow through this. Like, I am calling upon my system pretty aggressively. Same thing with a workout. If I'm going to go and lift weights or do something that is physically not just walking around like you do every day, you're calling upon your your CNS to do more than it is used to doing, I think that's where the fatigue comes in. And that's where, say with kids, why they can't perform as aggressively as they could, or they get tired quickly, or they're, like you said yesterday, why aren't these kids, like, it seems like they're moving in slow motion. It's like, because their CNS is not allowing it to fire faster. Like, they will get zapped. It's like when I was doing the ladder drills in our training that we just did. Mm-hmm. It's like my body physically could not go fast. It's like, and that's just because my fast twitch muscle wasn't capable of doing that. But it's also like, I could sense like it's like when I have too much coffee. It's like my body is just like, what is happening? That's what I was experiencing doing ladder drills. Like, I was getting confused quicker. It's like, I know I need to move my feet like this, but my brain isn't sending that signal quick enough to be able to have my feet do that. Like, I physically can't move that fast. So when you take that to a workout where you're trying to push and produce load or produce power to handle the load, if you can't send that signal, you're not going to be able to lift the bar off your back. You're not gonna be able to squat. You're not gonna be able to do the full range of motion and then being able to press out of that. That requires so much. Like, it is just like simple, like, it just requires energy. Like, that signal is energy producing. Yeah. That if you don't have that, it's like your body just goes, we can't handle that. And then you're not able to do it. And then that also becomes a fatigue issue, which then results in an injury issue.
Yeah. Because
sometimes you might just be able to push through it, but your body is, you're frying yourself, basically.
Well, yeah, when you're getting to the point of, the last repetition, or we got to run this dance again, and I don't have the conditioning, or I'm tired or something like that. Like, it is, your CNS cannot send the signal to contract and to move quickly again and to do that over and over again. That's what happens. It's kind of literally what's happening with when you're just doing bicep curls and you get to a point where it's like, I can't lift it anymore. It's like, one, your muscle's so fatigued, and like you're not sending the signal, and the signal's getting less and less and less because you're not producing enough energy to be able to do that anymore. So it's like working on that and practicing those things, doing them correctly, doing them properly. That's where you see people get injured, is they've been doing it improper for so long. And then they get to the point of fatigue, and now they're just trying to push through the last few. It's like, we've seen those people in the gym too, where the form goes out the window and they're just trying to get the bar off their chest, or they're just trying to like lurch and curl that last rep. It's like, those are your signals of, I mean, they're good signals because it's like, okay, you've pushed yourself to the point of fatigue, but you need to continue to be structured and rigid and only activate what you're supposed to be activating. And if you get to a point where you can't do it, it's fine. You just can't do it then.
Because then you're stretching your bandwidth to be able to handle more then.
Yeah, that's getting stronger, and that's, whether it's with cardio or strength, like you're pushing yourself to be able to handle more the next time you do that workout, or then, a month from now or whatever.
I think that's what happens with athletes a lot of the time. They're like we're saying with the dance thing, but also in the gym. The gym is easier to see because it's like, okay, when you can't perform the rep at the same speed and the same intensity that you have, that's when you're getting to that point.
Yeah.
To where when you're in a game or you're running a dance, if you're not working on expanding your bandwidth within your conditioning classes, then they're going to still go for it and they're going to still try to push for that. It's like, but you're tired and your whole system is fried because you've been just overworking it, and you're still going to do it. Well, now it's going to go back to the same thing we talked about with the squats of, if you shut everything down or you're not able to even call upon that stuff, your body's telling you, no, we're shutting down. Now you're going to again go to the path of least resistance. Yeah. And that's where you're going to get injured, is something that these movements that should not be promoting injury because it's supposed to be in a healthy range of motion. It's supposed to be in good movements. Now you're doing it funky because you're just trying to get through it. That's where the injuries come in.
Well, and it's very like simplistic to look at it that like this way, but if you can do the move once, there's a world you can do that move 100 times. sort of thing without injury is what I mean. If you can do it once without getting injured, you could do it 100 times without getting injured. So the idea is, how do I make that one time as efficient as possible? And then I can do it as many times as possible down the road. And that's, I think, where you see good dancers or good athletes, like they can replicate the same thing with high efficiency and doing it properly over and over and over and over again. That's why that's why everybody stresses form and doing it properly and doing it correctly, because that's probably the most efficient way. Or if you're in the hypertrophy world, you're actually trying to kind of make it the most inefficient way to make it really difficult on yourself, like making weight really heavy. If you wanted to be super efficient with weight, like speed and strength is going to be the way to go about it. You want to be in control of the bar. I say it's a bench press, and you're coming down at a not too fast, not too slow speed, and then you're pushing it off your chest pretty much as quick as you can go. It's like, and if you can replicate that over and over again, it's like take a bar with 95 pounds on it. You can make it as difficult as possible and only be able to do 10 reps, or you can make it as efficient as possible and do it for 20 potentially. And I think when you're talking about like performance and athletes and dancers and that sort of thing, when it comes to the warm up, when it comes to the cues in dance and the exercises, if you can make that the correct form, more proper, the right way to do things, you're going to be able to get more out of the dancers for longer periods of time, because they're properly warmed up and they're doing everything correctly. They're not going into those areas where they're doing the path of least resistance, and now that is even more fatiguing because they're not doing it correctly, and now halfway through the class they're already fried and they're done. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's where the stress of form and doing things correctly comes in, because you can get more out of the dancers and athletes and whoever by doing things the right way.
That's why I think it's so, and I know I stress this a lot, but if a child is in an activity where it involves physical movement, like if they're in a sport or if they're in dance or if they're in gymnastics, the importance of having a class like yours where it's performance based, it's conditioning, it's understanding body, the simple idea of body mechanics. It's so critical in my opinion, because if they can create, again, that same thing we talked about as you're developing, if you can develop those things as muscle memory from the jump, then that to me is like where you can see the higher end athletes able to do all of these higher level, like have a higher level ability, but also their IQ within whatever they are doing is so much greater, because they don't have to focus on the nuance of mechanics. They can move. Like we know a lot of people, I think in the dance world, even where it's like, oh, you move so different and so unique, but it is still safe and it looks correct.
Yeah.
Because the basics of how your body should be moving through space is so ingrained that it would be harder for you to not move that way. So now you can explore all these different unique ways, because your knees are still going to be in line with your toes. You're still going to be able to hold posture. You're still going to be able to create force and engage in your core so that you're able to do all of these things and it doesn't injure you or it looks wrong, or you're able to do these things because your body is working with you. That the younger you can do that, it's just ingrained in them deeper and deeper and deeper, that when you have the opposite of that, it's like you have to start from scratch, and in a way where their own body mechanics and their own movement style is almost already developed, that you then have to break how they naturally move first. It's like you see an adult and you go to train them. It's like, well, why don't we all just squat the same? Like, right. You can see, it's like every squat is a snowflake, it seems like. Like everyone moves so different and so weird, because all of your natural ways of moving your body is different. It could be your gait is a little bit bigger, so now this part of your hip is more stretched out. Or you sit down leaning into your right side majority of the time, so now your hips are twisted and your spine is twisted. Like each person does it so different, even though the movement is the same.
Yeah.
It's like, if you can break that earlier to where you're just like, this is how you're supposed to move. This is how you're supposed to, this is how you're supposed to move.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you are taking a very simple example, it's like, take somebody in ballet. If they can't have the turnout, like you're already so many steps behind. Like just simply you being able to stand there and kind of stand there comfortably with your feet turned out and have everything be in a line and posture, good posture and all that kind of stuff. You take somebody who struggles to even get into that position or hold that position, like they can't do the rest of ballet as good as the person who can.
Right.
And it goes in the same thing of just athletic performance. It's like, I can tell which kids are in other sports or other activities versus the ones that are not. And it's not that the ones that are not are solely focused on dance and only do dance. Like a lot of them aren't taking a ton of classes where it's like their body's so formed to dance, because there's those people too where your body's so formed to dance that it's like, oh, you just move like a dancer in every single thing we do. To where more of the case with the kids is like, they just aren't as active as the other kids. And you can see the athleticism play out in all of the things that we do. And it's like, I mean, even just a general thing of stressing the point of putting your kids in multiple activities, the crossover is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a couple kids that are just in cross country and they're dancers too. That's like, I can tell just simply you do something else, and all it is that you're doing is running. And it's like your body is moving way more efficiently, and you're faster, you're stronger, you have more explosiveness, and it's
your stamina is probably much better.
Your stamina's probably better, and you're just doing cross country. It's like that's not even an explosive sport, really. It's like you're just running for 2 miles, kind of thing. So
I notice that a lot with some of the kids I teach it with are in gymnastics. Like they're, again, going back to their IQ, like their body IQ, and we're talking about young kids. Their ability to pick things up is much quicker. So for kids that maybe even, aren't as skilled with like learning things quickly, like to me, that was me. Like I wasn't really good at picking things up in school, but my ability to understand my body does this, so I need to replicate it like this was quick. Like I could pick up new material very fast. Yeah. And these kids they had the same thing. Like I can see, okay, this person that's maybe just in this class or in a couple classes, it takes them longer to figure out, okay, well, she's putting her foot here, and then I have to put my arm here when I do that, to where the other kids that are in multiple things, or especially gymnastics, where it's so, you have to know what your body's doing. Otherwise, like there's a danger to it, that they're able to pick up very basic just dance moves quicker, because they're able to just visualize it, see it, and go, okay, my body needs to do this, and I can have that signal be sent to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it too is just simply repetition. They've done something like it kind of before. And that's just the being in multiple different sports too. You've kind of done this thing before. I mean,
kids that can do most, like a sport, can do probably a lot of sports.
Yeah. And they just continue to get more and more repetition of that. You take the person in gymnastics, or you take somebody, like there's a couple kids that play volleyball, and it's like you can just tell, oh, you've moved laterally before. And that's just, now when we're doing lateral drills, you know how to shuffle to the side, and you already know, like, oh, I got to squat a little bit to go over. To where I'm having to explain to some of the kids, like, hey, you can't stand up like a pencil. You have to bend your knees, have a wider base to then shuffle to the side. And that's like a new thing to them, to where the kids that have been doing volleyball or any other sport, that's already natural to them, because they've already been exposed to, hey, this is how you do the thing.
I wonder if parents can see that, or if we're just primed to see that because we're teachers of kids with this, like, and personal training and all that. Like,
I think it depends.
I'm in tune to, like, I have to notice how people move.
Yeah, I'm sure it's just how
even 5-year-olds, like even very young kids. Yeah, you're like, oh, I can tell that you do these things, or that, like, your body is naturally moves in this way. Like I always say that about Alani, our niece. Like she was 2 years old and I'm like, you're going to be really good at this.
Yeah.
And same thing with Hayden. Like you're going to be really good at the opposite thing, but you're going to be really good at it. It's like you can tell a 2-year-old by the way that their body moves and what they can understand of how to move it.
I think there's some of it where just you pay attention to it very closely, but I think it's also, I mean, it also just depends on how closely you're paying attention to it. And like we're in a setting where there's 5 to 15, 20 kids in a class, and it's like, it's very obvious when you put them side by side of what kids can do what and what kids can't do what. To where if you're a parent and you're only sending your kid to the class and then you're not watching, you're going to have no idea. Sure. It's just because you're not seeing it. But then at home, you're like, yeah, they actually do this really well. And then it's like,
but in comparison,
they go to a basketball game and they're like, oh, they're not doing as well as they are at home. And it's like, well, because they're not, you don't have 10 other kids right next to them doing the same thing. So it's just, we're able to see it every single week right in front of us.
Sure.
And then also at the conventions, we see it all
Hundreds
weekend.
of kids at a time. Yeah.
That's like, you can just, you can tell very quickly when they're all right next to each other.
I always say, maybe this is bad, but like during competition or whatever, like you see a kid even just backstage, you can tell just by their body style if they're going to be good or not and how they carry themselves. Like I can tell by the way a dancer walks if they're going to be bad.
Yeah. Well, and I think, again, going back to the video that I just watched, he's taking him through some movements and stuff. And it's like, oh, I can tell that you've never played sports before because you can't do some of the basic things that he's having you do. Like even just like, I don't remember what they call them, but just like having your on your hands and feet and then just like doing a step through, I think they called it, where you just take one leg, go through and like move to the opposite side. And it's like, he is so unstable and so wobbly. It's like, that's a very basic.
Well, and even for that, how
position.
many people wouldn't be able to connect? Okay, this leg is coming through, so this leg or this arm is coming up.
And he
like that would be confusing to them.
Like he had to almost like think about it and kind of move slowly and then get told like, yeah, that's right. So it's, I don't know, it's just a observation that it's like, oh, you can really tell who is, like I always say that I can tell who's played basketball before. When they grab a basketball, you can tell. It's like, it's just one of those things that it's immediate. You can tell. Have they dribbled a ball? Have they shot a ball before? Even just for like, did they play in school or have they played recently? Because somebody who hasn't, it's the same thing of like people who get on wheels. You know immediately who has been on a skateboard, rollerblades, whatever, versus somebody who is not. And it's so obvious. And I feel
most
the same
of the time
way with the ball sport.
That translates to a lot of stuff too. Like if your kids are able to do well, on wheels, like whether it's a skateboard or rollerblades, like something where their feet are moving at a different speed than their body, that usually translates differently into what sports or physical activities they will do well in compared to others. Like it wouldn't surprise me if most dancers aren't good at that actually.
At like skateboarding and that sort of thing? Oh God.
Yeah. Cause like the connection to like everything is produced with your feet with dance. Like very little is upper body focused. Like the control and the way that the weight transfer is opposite to what sports and efficiency should be. Like everything is in the balls of our feet to where like when we do like straight leg deadlifts, it's like weights in your heels. I am so conditioned to weights in my toes. Yeah. To where most for balance stuff, you want to have equal weight. And that's like not in my muscle memory at all, is equal weight in my feet. Yeah.
Well, and with us talking so much about kids and that sort of thing, like I think the athletic stuff is cool or important for people that aren't in it anymore too. Because I think, again, talking about injury prevention, but also just being able to keep movement as you get older and older and older. Like, I mean, we're talking about kids and just being more pliable and being able to pick stuff up quickly. As you get older, it seems to be much harder to move in the way that you once did. Your feet aren't as quick and, I don't know, you can't twist and turn in directions that you used to be able to. To me, that's just kind of all practiced. Are you continuing to practice it or not? That's where you see, like, I don't know, people picking up pickleball and stuff now. It's like, that's cool because it's more movement and athleticism than it is just go to the gym, lift some weights, go home type of thing. But I think that stuff, as you get older, is important too, because you talk about people who are falling, breaking hips, or just simply can't get up the stairs as well, or whatever it might be, pick up things, move things across the room, all that sort of stuff. It's like, that's kind of basic body movements that you do as you get older that you can be practicing even more extreme examples of that than like at the gym, rather than just like pick up some weights and move it. It's like, do those step through things. When is a 30-year-old person on their hands and feet anymwhat?
Right. Unless you're like playing with your kid, maybe.
Yeah. And even then, if you're playing with your kid, you're probably just sitting down.
Yeah.
Like, you're not walking around like a bear. So it's like,
That's what I love when I do have parents like sometimes sit in my classes and we'll do anything, like we're doing like animal action. And I'm like crawling on the ground, acting like a cat. And I'm in my head, I'm like, I'm 26.
yeah.
I'm 26-year-old acting like a cat, meowing at children on the ground. And this is my job.
Yeah.
And the parents are like, oh my God.
Yeah. How do you do that?
This is for life.
Yep. But yeah, I think it's something important to add into your exercising as you get older. Because what really comes down to it is being able to have strength within movement. And if you're just only doing static strength building stuff all the time, like when you trip, you're gone, you know, and that's just going to happen. You're not going to be able to avoid not tripping. So it's like,
and it's probably going to happen even more as you get older.
Right. So it's like, have you been doing stepping lateral lunges or stepping forward lunges, stepping backwards lunges, step ups? Have you been like any sort of stuff where you're moving your feet in all different directions and even if it's just with body weight, but then potentially adding some load to it? And I know it's the silly and it's the annoying thing that people do at the gym where it's like, you know, this guy's 45. It's like, what does he think he's going to play in the NFL again? He's setting up cones and he's doing cone drills and running back and forth and that sort of thing. It's like, yeah, there's maybe an appropriateness of like, don't do that in a gym, but it's like, it's cool that he's incorporating that into his exercising because that guy's going to probably have more longevity and be able to move a lot better as he gets older than somebody who's just going in and doing all the machines, you know?
That's the thing with like kids and then older adults, where we kind of had this U progression where the things that you work with your toddler is similar things that you work with your grandparents.
Yeah.
Like even the importance of, I think with kids in movement, why just having them be very physical is again developmentally helpful, because it's even simple things of doing things like cross body movements is awesome for kids' development, because even signaling wise, then that's where it focuses on left and right side of the brain where it bounces back and forth. So like emotional intelligence and being able to adapt to languages, that gets better just from being able to move cross body, like cross your midline. That I always joke when I teach the hip hop class, there's a part where we're like pushing away and moving opposite to our hands. And before we do it once and I turn around to them and I was like, I'm going to bet to the assistants that half of you are not going to be able to do that. And what you're going to do is you're going to push with the same hand that you're going towards, because the opposition, like that is a skill that is tricky for them. Or like if you see kids doing that, a lot of them, once they get to a certain point developmentally, they will be able to do that, but they'll start to like go really big or do this, or they're not able to do like alternate tapping. Like that is something their brain needs to be able to do. Like they're not like physically able to do that yet.
Yeah.
And then you see that decline as people get older where they're not able to do that as much, because then they don't know how to, like, their brain like stops working that way. And same thing with the tripping or the being able to step off of steps. Like their CNS, again, that signaling slows down the same way that it starts slow with kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's just like a full circle thing. And it's like the more that you can work on that stuff with kids to be able to get to the point where they can do it, they're more efficient with what they do than after that. And then as they get older, you just continue to do that stuff and keep that. Now it's just like preventative. Now you're just trying to keep it as long as you can. as you get older. Yeah, that stuff is it is so funny. Like the all of the similarities between kids and older people is it's like, oh, you end up just working on the same stuff you were or should have been when they were a kid.
It goes right back to working on your fine and gross motor skills.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know, and that's why I think in a lot of countries where they live longer, they're doing things that require both of those. Like they're going on walks. They're able to still read. They're writing their own things down. They're like even cooking, like the ability to articulate your fingers.
Yeah.
The same way that you see that in toddlers, why it's hard for them. It's like that stuff that is so day to day that people start to help you with. Mm-hmm. Like that is a hard thing, I think, with family members when you have older people in your family, is how much do you help versus like, no, they can still do this. Same way with kids. They can do this. Now you got to back away. As soon as they figure out how to do it, never do it again, because you're taking their ability to like really develop those things and be able to like practice them daily and work on them with every little thing. You start to take that away from them, and now they're going to not be as developed with that. And then same thing on the other end, things that are like writing their own stuff down, taking their plate into the kitchen because, well, so-and-so, we don't want to have them get off their couch. I can just do it for them. It's like, yeah, but now you just took out them being able to stand up, them having to balance something in their hands while they're walking, the ability to like notice the depth perception as they're walking in there, the putting the plate in the sink. Like,
it's a
you're
cliche.
being helpful, but that is such a fine line.
Yeah. It's the cliche. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
And it's true with everything. Cognitively, physically, if you're not continuously walking, you're going to lose the ability to walk. If you're not, like you said, fine motor skills. If you're not using your fingers, using your hands to bake stuff or to cook things or just grab things, writing, any of that sort of stuff, you're going to lose the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. It's the same thing with strength building and muscle and all that kind of stuff. It's like people get extremely weak because they're not doing anything with resistance. It's only body weight stuff, or even less than that. Like they're not getting up off the couch anymore, or they're not walking around the grocery store to get their stuff. They're just grabbing a cart and scootering around. Like it's very simple, easy, clear. It's clear math. If you're not doing it, you're not going to be able to do it at some point. And I think that gets more into specifics or expert level, I guess you could say, of like adding a little bit of athletic training into your own program. Because like if you're not moving quickly side to side, you're not going to be able to move quickly side to side. So if at some point you trip over and you got to take a step to the right, you're not going to be able to. Mm-hmm. You haven't been doing it. And that's where all of that athletic training stuff comes in, is being able to do all of those things. And then when you have kids or you have grandkids and you're wanting to play with them and you're wanting to do that stuff, but you can't move well, it's like now quality of life goes down. You're not able to do that stuff, or you're not able to, play basketball outside because you haven't been training athletically or can't do that stuff. And now
now it seems like a danger.
Yeah,
to do it.
you've only been bodybuilding for the last 25 years, and now you go to play basketball with a grandkid and you roll your ankle or you tear your Achilles because you're never doing that stuff anymore. And then you're like, yep, I can't play basketball anymore. It's like, no, you couldn't play basketball because you weren't doing anything to prepare yourself to be able to play basketball. You haven't jumped in 25 years. You haven't taken a quick step to the left in 25 years, So it's like, that's not well, I'm old, I can't do this anymore. Like that's an excuse. That's not just what happens. It's like you let it happen. You let it become that, to where you could have been doing stuff to be able to minimize that. So you can move quickly and you can play basketball and you can, chase grandkids around, or you can do all of the things. Yeah.
Closing remarks. You said that you could tell who has played basketball before when you've seen me navigate a basketball. Could you tell that I played in second grade?
Well, there's, I guess, some spectrum to this. It can't be one single season as a second grader. So no, if I would have said no, you didn't play, because you basically did not play.
So it looked like I've never played before. My abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh, see, weirdly, it looked like you have played before, but not a lot. Like, you could take the ball and bounce it. Even that is like, people who haven't played before, that is a weird concept of a ball going down and coming back up at them.
Sure.
They don't know how to control that side to side, forward and backwards. Like, you notice everybody has the same stance when they haven't played basketball. They squat really low and they like just like bounce it, like they like smack at the ball.
Yeah.
And then they like swivel and turn around and like put their back to you.
Yeah.
That's always the non-basketball player move. And then the jump shot is always crazy, weird, atrocious looking. But no, you were like, okay, you have played probably a little bit, but you don't have any skills.
Sure.
You can bounce a ball, you can shoot a ball, but it's like you can't handle a fast break.
I think how I would describe my movement style, it's like I am so dance conditioned that it's like it's hard for me to, like, when I'm forced to do athletic-y type of things, it like looks off. Like, it looks like you should probably have the ability to do that, but something just looks a little bit not correct here.
I think that's changed though over the years. I think with all of the weight training that you've done, and like probably the kettlebell program stuff and doing that, those sort of things too. Like, when we were doing the performance one, you were doing everything with the right form, which if you were that dancer trained, like, you wouldn't even look.
Sure.
You wouldn't even be able to look it, to where you just couldn't fire. Like, the fast twitch just wasn't able to. But that's also just a practiced thing. Like, that's just having to do it. So I think you're less dancer trained now than before.
Well, I'm also doing it much less, so it's probably...
Yeah, and you're doing something other than dancer. And that's not to say that people who are dancing shouldn't be. It's like, you should be, like, if dance is the thing, you should be doing that more than anything else.
Right. You
know, it's like, if you're a football player, you should be practicing the skills of football more than anything else. You see guys like Kevin Durant, the guy's 7 feet tall and rail thin. Like, he doesn't really lift weights. He doesn't do that kind of stuff. But he's one of the best shooters in the NBA. He's one of the best basketball players probably to ever live. Top 10 maybe. So it's like, all he's ever done is trained basketball. And that's where it gets you. He hasn't trained the other stuff. So it's like, if you're wanting to get good at a sport or a skill, basically, you need to do that skill more than anything else. You shouldn't be in the gym weight training, resistance training more than anything else. If you want to be a strength
well, it's even like your style of working out, whatever you want to do working out, that's what you should be training more.
Yeah, but then like that shouldn't be overriding your training or skills of what you're trying to accomplish. Like, you shouldn't be a dancer dancing one class a week and then going to the gym 6 days a week and being like, I want to be a professional dancer. Well, not going to work out.
Yeah.
You got to flip that ratio.
Well, not going to happen. Yeah. Okay, please subscribe and like everything.
That's a good place to stop.
Bye.
As soon as we start singing, it goes downhill.
I don't know. Okay, bye.
See you later.